Yes, indeed. Pink Boy is back with another vid. This time, I'm gonna follow up on my previous vid talking about, well, the previous one was talking about relearning or something like that. Don't exactly remember, but just, um, yeah, the idea was that it's good to brush up on things and not just kind of like leave things, um, hanging in like the annals of your mind or in history, blah blah blah. Long story short, this video is about this one is about unlearning. So this is a concept I've wanted to talk about for a while now, but I just started making videos, and it is what it sounds like basically. But you know, I don't think it's just about understanding what the word means, right? I'm trying to convince you why it's a good idea to do it. So what's unlearning about? So I think basically, and I'm gonna get a little bit biblical on this one, just because I think it makes it easier to talk about something when you have something else that's popular and people have kind of signed on with. But at the same time, I don't know what if people really realize what it means. Unlearning means, I guess you could say, in biblical sense. Obviously, it's not the main idea or the only idea, I should say. But when I was trying to understand that, and I understood this part of human development, I thought they fit very neatly together. And so, this idea of unlearning is the idea that you have to, it's kind of like a snake sheds its skin. So, I think there's a secular example for you. You have to shed a piece of your self, and a part of yourself is obviously some of your knowledge and some of your, and as this isn't just an academic knowledge. This is just what you know as a person, what you know about yourself, and how you identify the world, how you identify yourself. And so every once in a while this needs to get renewed again. When I talk about the triple I principles: identify, implement, iterate. This is a very big part of the iteration process. This is why I came up with it. Again, this is a part of why I came up with the iteration process, because it's, if you think about how some things are and if about the evolution, this is almost inevitable, and we all kind of do it to an extent as well. None of these things, most of these things, I should say, maybe not none, aren't exactly some eureka moments, brand new ideas that no one has talked about. In fact, I think a lot of people have talked about it already. And I was kind of discouraged for a while, thinking like, oh, I don't really have anything unique to contribute. But it's not about just having something unique to contribute, because not everybody gets it from the first try. Not everybody is on board with something. And sometimes as people keep looking, they'll come across a source that is convincing, that is relevant to them. So hopefully some of you guys will sign on, and only if you really feel like it, if you agree with this in your core, or after you've kind of bashed these ideas as much as you can, and you feel like, hey, no, there's plenty of or there's enough treasure or valuable things in there that you're willing to take it on. So this unlearning thing, right? It's very interesting in the sense that the term I'm using is almost like an oxymoron, because or is almost hypocritical, where it's like, doesn't, you're trying to learn but you're trying to not learn. Like, what are you trying to, are you trying to be poetic? Not really, because what I'm going to say that unlearning is mainly about is identifying things in your psyche, in your personality, and in your knowledge base, that are up for scrutiny. Uh, Quick tip: everything is at all times. But what's my basis for saying, for advocating for it? Well, let's think about who we are and how we come about. At this point, we've been kids, and as kids, we learn stuff, and a lot of that stuff we learn for the very first time. A lot of our experiences are our first experiences in some ways, and we develop a lot of habits, knowledge, and ideas simply by just rolling the dice in a way, based on where we were born, based on how what we were predisposed to as well, and how we end up, what situations we end up getting with in terms of our parents, friends, society, and so on. Now, having said that, there is a certain amount of bad antisocial behaviors that we pick up as kids, because as kids we're very selfish, we're very, very, very much attuned to like self-preservation. We want to protect ourselves and we want things, but we realize that like the world is almost surrounded by, almost everybody is more powerful than us, especially if you're a younger sibling, even your older sibling who may be just like a year or two older than you. Even that person is like all of a sudden so much more powerful than you, so you end up having to go around kind of like begging people, asking people, and you end up crying for things, and so you kind of eventually realize that you can get away with what? With lying. So I'm not saying that we grow up to be liars, but in many cases we've shown to be quite a bit tricky and deceptive, especially when we're personally involved with something. But even that's not the main point. As we're growing up, our brains are still not as mature as they will eventually be. So we go to school. So at school, what's happening? We're immediately entering this competitive and socializing sphere where we have to both learn how to be social, how to coordinate and communicate with each other and with our peers, but at the same time we're competing with them for who's going to have a better future, let's say that way, right? Like we're starting to get grades, and the teachers are going to start discussing stuff with our parents, like your kid's really good at math, your kid likes drawing, and so on and so on, which I think is a big fucking mistake. I don't think we should start this competitive process that early, because kids just, whatever the first things they learn ends up being the last thing they talk about or have in their minds, because these things are just so powerful and they become so well kind of like layered on by the rest of the experience that it's almost impossible to dig them back up if you're not kind of diligent with it earlier on. And you end up kind of just being slave to them. They kind of control you from the very depths. It's like a submarine kind of like in there, and controlling things from the bottom of the sea. So yeah, going back to the school stuff, we have to learn things, right? Like we have to get on board, we have to pass. I don't think anybody really has problems passing. Maybe the bar is pretty low in school, but at the same time they have to make you understand certain things. They have to make you understand math, they have to make you understand language, and what are the other subjects? Like, yeah, there's like arts. I don't know what they teach nowadays, but there's some important things they don't teach and they should teach. That's like meditation, self-awareness, and restraint, and like emotional control. That's for next topic. But what happens when you need to teach these complex topics to a rather primitive kid? No matter how prepubescent, what is it called? Precautious the kid is, right? So they can be a wizard for all you know, but they're just not there in terms of mental flexibility like an adult is, like with the ability to wield knowledge and live in dynamic realm of like gray areas that we like to call. So what happens? So we have to, and also this is kind of why we have to now start telling grown-ass adults like, hey, it's not just black and white, it's a gray area. That's because from a very early age, we start teaching kids to think in absolutes. So there's absolute numbers, absolute colors, there's absolute, words mean absolute values. That's why it was so crazy when I was in school, and then we'd be asked like, hey, write an essay. It's like, okay, but everybody would freak out, like, because they kind of knew at their core, like, man, I can write about something, but how am I going to really know that that's the right thing to say? And teachers would always try to make us um, at ease, be at ease. It's like, oh no, no, it's okay. There's no wrong answers. I'm like, no, there's fucking wrong answers. Don't get me wrong. Like if you're doing an essay on Romeo and Juliet, and you talk about how Romeo was a cisgendered fairy or whatever you want to call it, or if you're going to talk about how Juliet was actually the what do you call it? A Nazi. Let's put it that way. I'm using SJW terms. There's nothing really specific or mean-spirited there. All I'm saying is that there are certain things you can say about works of literature, and there are certain things that are just not there. So there are no wrong answers is a very, very bad term, because even when you're talking about Romeo and Juliet and you come up with an argument saying that like Romeo was a villain and he just ruined everybody's life and he's responsible for all this other stuff, you're not going to have a very good argument for it. You can stretch it, you can be like this wordsmith who can like make everything seem one way, but not a lot of people will get on board with that, and you should be okay with that. But this idea that they always have to produce high grades at the end is what kills kids, and it kills this whole system. It just destroys it. Yeah, anyway, probably later on some kind of grading is important. You have to weed better people out from worse for like the jobs or for positions, but not at this stage. Not at this stage. So kids and being smarter than their parents and learning from their parents. So now they're all trying to get into good schools. They're trying to get good grades, or parents are terrorizing them. They'll take away their consoles and all this other stuff. So this human brain is already working with some very bad presuppositions, and presuppositions, these a priori arguments or things we postulate for ourselves at the very beginning, they don't seem to go away. They don't go away that easily. So what happens is that we end up diverting or altering our thought process at a very early age in the wrong way. There is no need for kids to get good grades in 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the whole elementary school should not be about grades. Everybody should get to kind of pass, but with certain, cautionary advice from from teachers to parents, or there should be. I mean, I have theories on that one. Not right now, but we need to encourage kids to think dynamically, to think in a gray area, and to think expressively and to think courageously. They need to know that making mistakes is a part of the process. We chop that up right in the beginning, and in elementary, and some of these kids, maybe they go to these private schools that are even more rigorous, and they give them these fake tests. You know what the real stupidity there is that kids are really good at doing what you're going to tell them to do. You're going to tell them to think in terms of black and white, they're going to do it. And you know what else they're going to do? They're really, really, really good at finding loopholes. Just like I said, that kids find ways to lie, or to get things, to cry, to come up with all these different ways to get something that they want because they're not in the power to give it themselves. They're going to find ways to game the system, basically. And these systems with all these grades, the biggest problem there is that they've been gamed. We've seen what happens with these universities, with parents paying up, and trust me, that's not the only way that you can game the system here. So we end up loading ourselves with baggage, and I'm going to justify this to an extent. Sometimes it's necessary. I don't think it's easy to teach algebra or some kind of geometry, trigonometry, or whatever that sounds fancier, Voltaire or philosophy to a 7-8-year-old. It's just not an easy feat. So you have to keep them engaged. You have to keep them also a little bit pacified, and you also have to keep them a bit happy. You have to keep giving them some sort of rewards, and you can just give it to them for nothing. So you have to get them, I guess, can I keep solving problems or doing things, and they have to feel rewarded, and they're encouraged to do more and solve more problems, maybe more difficult problems, and they kind of also realize, and also like a lot of kids follow this mentality blindly, like, the whole idea where people are like, oh, they just constantly want more and more and more and more and more. Like, we've kind of built this into them, right? Like, we're saying, oh, you're going to solve these in grade 1, and you're going to solve these in grade 2, then grade 3 is there's more, and then there's more rewards coming in grade 5, then there's grade 6, and there's tougher challenges. So people get addicted to this cycle as well. So having said all this, right, like, where does the unlearning come in? Well, when I went to university, I thought what I learned was decent. I did skip a lot of school, but I was doing well on the exams, and I understood what the hell all that stuff was about. So I went in there, and all of a sudden I'm in classes hearing how this is bullshit, that's not actually how this works. Well, these things aren't actually all that. There's like, I was learning about like sciences on a more deeper level, about like the laws, the businesses, and I'm just like, what the fuck did they teach us in school? So I was like, why couldn't they just start with this thing? And honestly, to some extent, they definitely could have. There are definitely subjects that we learned in university. I don't know if your schools are the same way, but I think that a lot of this is shit. It's like taking some very important knowledge that every kid should be privy to, and putting it behind a big ass paywall. Not only a paywall, a big ass like time decision that a person has to make. Like, let's say they have the money, but like, I don't want to spend 4 years. I have other things to do. That's 4 years of my like very critical stage in my life. So a lot of the stuff that we're being taught in universities, it's really not up to snuff. But anyway, we'll keep going, and we'll get there. And I certainly realized that a lot of things weren't so much wrong that we were taught in school, but they were oversimplified. They were oversimplified, and they just weren't gonna add up. Like, if I was gonna follow that train of thought or that logic, I wasn't gonna get real results. I had to think more dynamically. I had to think more open-mindedly, and I also had to think on my feet. And I realized something extremely important, is that a lot of these facts and ideas and theories that were being served up to me from credible sources were still subject to human flaw. Nobody there knew what was exactly right. Like, people were discovering this thing as we go, and like, I kind of became pretty intimate with the fact that this is a process. Learning is a process, education is a process. I'm not saying that 10 years from now everything we've learned is going to be complete bullshit, but there are layers and angles to some of this stuff that take time to realize and to manifest. So I had to scrap a lot of things that I was kind of hinging a lot of my bets on, I should say it that way. I had to relearn a lot of this stuff. Also, I kind of started my life out as a religious person. I lived in Georgia, that's very religious. I moved to Poland, also very religious, both Christianity wise, and I was on board with it. And as later I started questioning a lot of these things, I was getting very disappointing results, but it was hurting me to realize that a lot of this stuff was, in this case, I guess I would say it's kind of like a lie in many ways. I figured, like, one of the main things I remember I told myself was, how can there be one Jesus but so many different Christianities? How can there be Catholicism, Protestantism, Mormonism, and all these other denominations, Pentecostal, New Reformists, and whatever? It seems like there's more flavors than ice cream flavors, So I figured that there was something not right there, and I picked that part of myself. I pried it open like with pliers, and I realized that it was hollow. I cracked it loose and let it pop, kind of like a zit or one of those like fun bags, on the bubble wraps. And then there was all this other stuff that like humanity is so special and we have this like intellect and love is this pure thing, and it's like, well, no, love's just a chemical. I remember having this class in university and this guy couldn't handle it and he freaked out. He's like, what? Love's not just a chemical. This is bullshit. And the teacher was like, oh, okay, calm down now. Like, that's not, yeah, it is. And she was kind of like, it wouldn't let him kind of get the upper hand. She's like, well, no, it is though. And he's like, no, this is bullshit. And I was like sitting there. Remember, I was also feeling like, damn, what the fuck? Is everything like some kind of a molecule or a reaction? I didn't want to take it, man. But then I thought about it some more and it made sense to me. I'm not saying that you always have to accept the new things that you learn. I've rejected many things that I just didn't agree with. But at the very least, you have to be open to this possibility. And this is what makes unlearning possible. Like, you have to be open to once in a while, not once in a while, you maybe even have a cadence where like things are presented to you in a new light and you have to now basically have this greatness thrust upon you and you have to make a decision. Do I just say no, fuck it? Because plenty of people say that, no, I don't want to deal with this. I'm comfortable with the way I see the world and I don't want to do that. That's okay. I just don't think those people are watching this stuff, right? But if you are, sometimes you have to initiate this process yourself, and you have to. But sometimes it just kind of happens by happenstance that you are forced to think about some things that you didn't before. So this isn't also like an academic undertaking. Okay. So this isn't exactly an academic undertaking as well. This is a personal undertaking, right? Like, this is self development and personal development here, where why I brought childhood up, and now I'm gonna bring Jesus into this, but why I brought childhood up is that as you grow, how many memories do you really have of your childish preteen years? Not that many. I mean, if you actually think about it, you can probably count them on two hands, right? You have to think about them diligently, but on an hourly basis you can't recall things specifically, and that's the problem. But during that whole time, you were doing things, you were learning things, your brain was making decisions, your brain was making choices, and it was saying, okay, this is fine, that's not fine, this is fine, that's not fine, I'm okay with this, I'm not okay with that. So you're stuck with it, kind of, right? And that's what I also realized later on, is that when you don't think about something and you take something for granted, that's where you have the biggest weakness about this kind of stuff. When you are actively debating something, like let's say you're an atheist and you're out there going around looking for videos how like religions are wrong and how they're doing this stuff. This isn't really the thing that's holding you back in terms of growth and development. But on the flip side, let's say you're a firm believer that like natural is obviously the better choice for food than not, or like let's say you just don't even think about how the meat is made. You're just like, okay, meat, let's say, is protein, and everybody eats meat. Like when you react like this to something and it has nothing to do with a subject I mentioned, it could be about anything, that's where you have the most growth. That's when you can do the most amount of unlearning and learning at the same time. Because trust me, you can't unlearn without learning again. Otherwise, that's called forgetting. Okay. And you're gonna have to pay attention to yourself in this way. And that's why I say, like, a lot of these self-improvement methods, I think the ones that are effective are hard to sell because they're very time consuming. They take like, the amount of time you spend, let's say, watching a TV show is like maybe even not enough to allocate towards something like this, where you're just like, I've never thought about why I never, go to sleep early, for example. Like I've never thought about it. I just go to sleep whenever I fucking want to go to sleep. And I don't think anybody should have the right to tell me when I want to go to sleep. But if you poke yourself in that direction and you kind of ask yourself, oh, I see, go back in time a little bit. Well, I kind of like going to sleep later because I like playing video games. And a lot of times my mom would tell me go to sleep and I would pretend to sleep and then I would wake up and hide. Now you can start to see traces where like, oh shit, maybe this whole idea of me going to sleep late isn't natural, or I'm not a night owl, but it's just a habit I've internalized so easily that my mind does not even bother bringing this stuff up. I mean, when you do nasty shit in your life and you weren't really comfortable with it, like maybe let's say you were herding kittens or something like that, this kind of could bubble up later and be like, look, I wasn't really happy with this. Can we reconcile? Okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm apologetic for it. But something like that, let's say, going to sleep late, put it, just to keep the example going. See, that's a bit sinister because you're not thinking about it. It didn't bug you. It was comfortable. But it's not helping you. And you feel very strongly about not changing your comfort zone. And whenever you find yourself very vigorously protecting your comfort zone, sorry, but you're gonna have to knock and see why you're so protective over it. Trace back some steps. And some of you with bad memory, man, you're at a disadvantage. I'm sorry to say, but it's not very easy to recall stuff that you just don't remember or you weren't caring about. That's why you should be a caring person. You should care about stuff. You should remember things, and you should recall them from time to time, iterate over them. But hey, I did promise you to talk about Jesus, right? And like, how does all this come into play? Well, a lot of this stuff, I should say, really hit me before I turned 30, and as I turned 30, I got a better grip on this stuff. And so then I realized I made a big transition. I was in school, didn't really know what I wanted to do in school, so then I did it anyway. I graduated, did well enough. Then I had some years where I didn't apply myself all that much, but you know what, I was learning, I was getting it. I graduated not really sure what I wanted to do. I guess wanted to get a job. I got a crappy job right out of it, well, and then like a nice downtown office, but I was like, my god, 4 years to get to work as a freaking proofreader for a company that like it's basically office general labor. I was like, wow, what a life. So I was always thinking about what I wanted to do. I was always experimenting with myself, with life. I wanted to do maybe stand up, then I wanted to do acting, then I wanted to change the world, then I wanted to do all of these things. I just didn't know where to start. But then as time went by, I realized that I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't being very effective. So I said, I'm going to change stuff about myself. So what I noticed was that every time I would pick something up, I would easily drop it as soon as it got a bit challenging. And there's a real rule there, to be honest. Like I discovered this pattern on myself, which is kind of shit because I think it's been discovered plenty times before. And the fact is that when complexity rises, determination drops. And that's how you weed out the weak hands where, you know, you make med school tough so that people aren't just there for easy money to prescribe Advils. They actually care about helping people. That's why you have, again, lawyers, not just being a bunch of crooks, hopefully, and so on and so on. So barrier to entry is important because it weeds out unnecessary amount of bloat. And what I learned about myself is that, I was just kind of giving myself nice, very convenient excuses not to do something as soon as it was getting challenged. In the beginning, I'm going to say, I was liking it. I'm like, oh, I'm so good at this. Look at me. A plus B equals C. Or like, look at this little computer thing I just picked up. And hey, let me see if I can take this a bit further. Oops, no, it's tough now. Fuck it, it's not for me. So eventually I came to a point where I said, look, fuck it. Can't do that no more. There are certain things I've noticed, certain patterns aren't adding up. I am not achieving things I want to achieve, and I'm not getting anywhere because I'm not applying myself. So I said, next thing I'm going to pick up, I'm going to do, and I'm going to stick to it. And I started doing computer programming because I thought it was going to be something easy and logical to grasp because of how logical it would be. Kind of a mistake in that scenario. But I started changing myself, and I started profoundly making things different, and I started unlearning things that were very precious to me, these identities that I had of myself as an artist, the identities of thinking I'm some kind of creator, world changer, whatever. And I started getting more grounded expectations, more grounded steps to go up. I still want to do something more profound, but I started doing things differently. And I realized what this Jesus' rebirth metaphor is. It's this process of unlearning and weeding out your old inefficiencies, your old built-in, I would say, kind of like sins, right? Like these things that you have in there, kind of that are there by the virtue of you being a human and them being outside of your control. But as a part of your development into adulthood, you want to identify them, and you want to stop. You want to stop acting, playing into their hand the way you have before. There are certain things about you that you're gonna have to do differently when you're an adult. When you're like, imagine you're a 12-year-old kid or whatever, and you're like, man, this and that. You're gonna be maybe a bit reckless. You're gonna be a bit rude, and it's okay. You're just a kid. You can't be doing the same exact behavior in your, let's say, 30s or 40s. For one, you're probably gonna get your ass kicked eventually. But if we're not, people are gonna think you're just an idiot, right? Like, it's fun to be an idiot as a kid. It's like funny. If you're doing it as an adult, man, you better be getting paid for it as an actor or comedian or something, because it ain't fucking worth it if you ask me. And so but unlike with Jesus, where he came back and it was all set, I lean more towards the Buddhist vision of this whole thing, where it's a process. These things there's going to be even more coming up. There's going to be even more inefficiencies, and that's kind of like a curve you're going to have to scale at in your life. You're going to be a bit inefficient. You're going to be a bit childish, let's put it that way. But if you have the will and you have the method by which you can improve yourself, you will find that you're going to ramp up rather quickly, and you can keep scaling high. Like, you'll be able to, and then later you will probably be hitting some diminishing returns, where it's like you don't just have, like, you're obviously not going to become perfect, or there's like won't be anything you can improve on. You can always improve on something, but you'll notice that, like, there will be things about yourself that you're going to say, like, look, this is, because the age is going to take a lot of it out of you as well, right? Like, let's say you're going to be in your 40s and you're like, look, man, I think at this point I'm kind of comfortable with, like, not waking up early. You know what? And with every year, maybe I'm closer to retirement, and that's not going to be an issue anymore either. So some things you're probably going to have to forfeit, but there will be other things where you still have time, especially if you retire, whenever you do, and you have time on your hands. You can pursue self-improvement in any avenue, but if you don't get into the habit of doing this early, you won't know where to look. It's like slow closing chamber in, like, Indiana Jones or one of these, like, adventure movies. It may take its time to close. You can see the light on the other side and you know where to go, but eventually it'll close low enough that you won't get past it. To start this process, I think, from scratch in your 50s, 60s is doable, but you really have put a burden on your shoulders that didn't really need to be there. But never get discouraged. So I'm not saying this to discourage anyone, but all I'm saying is to encourage people to do it now. even if you're 60, let's say, and you're trying to do this, don't wait till you're 61 or 65. You have exponentially less time to uh, be successful in some of these areas. So holy crap, this one took a while, eh? Let's end it here, because I guess it's supposed to be technically one of these like vlog formats. But free to discuss this. I hope I made some sense. I think that the longer a topic stretches, the harder it is to keep focus. Maybe I can talk about focus next. But you should be aware that there's a little kid inside of you governing you, and you don't even know it. And if you were to ask me if there's like one TLDR, like let's say one takeaway from all this, is that break the brat, rescue the child. In yourself, there's, from this youth, you carry that image of yourself. It kind of is a model on top of which other things are being built. It has bad qualities, bad personality, and it has good features. The good features of a youthful person is curiosity, forgiveness, innocence, honesty. These are all kind of like candor, I would say, not honesty, right? Like these are all qualities in a person that we admire, and there are more. But the brat is also a brat, a petulant kid who selfish, who wants things, who wants them now, who will lie, cheat, who will cause trouble for no reason, who will squeal and just protect themselves by any means, which is like, I don't know, I guess you could say that's debatable, but a person who will get violent. A lot of these like sinful qualities are basically like bratful qualities. Like you want to find where that brat is hiding in you, which one of those brats, I guess you could say, are hiding in you. Kick their fucking asses. But the children that are there, the child in you that is helping you progress, learn, improve in your career, make friends, you have to nurture that one or those guys. So I think that that about sums it up. But keep open-minded to learning, that, and just realize that learning is not a finite achievement. It is a process, and a process is sometimes cyclical, but it's always progressive. There's more, and it changes shape, it changes direction, and don't forget that. And it has intervals, and in certain intervals they'll come. You'll either know them or you'll find them that you need to restart some parts of this process. So unlearn. Don't just be happy with what you have. Be happy with what you can have. And pay attention in school, because a lot of people just fucking claim that they didn't really learn anything in school, but they're still pretty dumb. Hey, well, why didn't you learn outside of school then? Anyway, stay happy and stay learning.